Welcome to the High Agency Podcast with your host, Noah Ravoy.
And I'm here today with Alice, and we're going to be talking about the differences between marriage market value and sexual market value. This is a really interesting topic that always gets a lot of attention when we speak about it. Now, I'm going to let you, Alice, describe why it's an interesting topic for you and also who you are and how you're connected to me.
Yeah, no worries. I'm Alice McKinty. I'm Ryan Drummond's partner, so your co-author's partner. I've been fascinated by this topic for a really long time. It's something that I put a lot of effort into learning for myself because I wanted to make sure that I had a good partner who I could rely on, for life.
Yeah, it's not something that we hear a lot about. We're starting to hear a little bit about sexual market value talked about in the manosphere. I don't really think that women have anyone that's talking to them about it. There are a few manosphere guru type guys who are talking to women about it, but I'm not sure that there's a lot of them listening to that conversation. Mm-hmm. But no one's talking about marriage market value. That's basically, I'm the only one mentioning it.
Yeah, I have found if you look in the right niches online, there are certain pockets of information about marriage for women, but they are very, very few and far between. And I think a lot of people get the two terms kind of mixed up. If you're talking about sex, you can pretty much cover the topic of sex without thinking about marriage, right? But if you're thinking about marriage, you can't adequately cover that topic without also talking about sex and what it means and why we need it and why we want it and who we want to have it with. So it's a really important distinction to make. And I think a lot of people assume that if they are sexually attractive, they are also attractive as a long-term partner, and that's not always the case.
Yeah, and they also assume that it's not, because, I don't think people are sexually attractive or not. It's a gradient, and so who you're sexually attractive to for a hookup is very different than who you'll be attractive to as a potential marriage mate.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the hardest things for people to swallow, is that they can get attention from someone, but they can't get that person to sustain attention over time.
Yeah.
So you can't keep a marriage with them.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about how this is relevant specifically to women, because you did mention that this is kind of a shortfall of these topics. So if you're talking about sexual and marriage market value for women, it depends upon the other party, right? You need to know what men want. Men, in terms of sexual market value, men are quite heavy on the ego, right? There's a lot of kind of bro stuff going on with men. They like to feel powerful. They like to feel present, valuable, noticed, by their brothers in the community. So if they want to have a notch on their bedpost, be as hot as you can, be engaging, have a lot of personality about you, and you'll be noticed by that guy. That's not necessarily the case for marriage, right? You don't want your wife parading herself around with 50% of her breasts just on display.
Yeah, you don't want your mates. You don't want your mates lusting after your wife.
Yeah, and being, really, really engaging with every man in the room. That's not what you want in a wife. There are different qualities there that you're looking for, and so, okay, yeah, you might want a wife who's smoking hot, but you don't want her to show that to the world all of the time. So there are differences in not so much in who you are in your physical body. But in your approach.
Yeah, how you market yourself is what it is.
Yeah.
And people don't like to use the term market often because we've got this negative connotation from years of propaganda that somehow markets are evil. So what you can do is think about it is it's shorthand. It's a shortcut to understand the value exchange that we have in relationships. And so all relationships have some sort of a value exchange. Even between a parent and a child, the parent takes care of the child. The child, is cute and gives their little coos and ahs and ohs and all the little things they do that are so sweet. And the parent gets pleasure from having that child and from watching the child grow. And it also satisfies the parent's need to procreate and to leave a legacy. But it is an exchange. Now, it's not a exchange in the sense that, I think I've given my kid a little too much. I better go, zero this thing out and get back to an even deal. It's not like that, but it is a case where we are supposed to police ourselves to make sure that we are not imposing costs on people in a relationship that we're not taking more than we give. And so there's a lot of market dynamics that can help us to understand why our strategy works or doesn't work.
Yeah.
So why does our strategy to get a partner work, or why doesn't it work, and what can we do to change it?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, if you want to move now from the sexual market into the marriage market, we've pretty much already established if you want to get the attention of men, be as physically attractive and as personally engaging as you can. So you're satisfying his ego response in that situation. But behind that presence, behind that ego, is a much deeper person who you need to get to know. You need to, understand, what does he want? What does he need in life? What are his goals? What are his dreams? What are his fears? These are big things that you can't address if you only appeal to someone's ego, because they won't reveal that to you. You're a surface level connection at that point. You're not a deeper connection. And so you need to, show an interest in people. Really put yourself forward as a person rather than as a sexual being, as a spirit, if you like, which I don't really like those woo-woo kind of terms, but I think people will tune into what it means. You really need to make yourself available, and you need to communicate, okay, this is my skill set. I can do X, Y, Z very well. These things can serve you if you are this kind of person. And this is how you scope out compatibility, right? You're looking for somebody who has certain qualities that will serve you in good ways towards your goals, and you also want to display your qualities that can help people towards their goals. So, as you say, it's an exchange. But you need to showcase the things you have available for transaction, if you like.
Yeah, and one of the things that people will, when they hear skills, they usually tend to think of hard skills like cooking, cleaning, domestic skills. And those are important depending on your social strata. They're more or less important. But for one of the really overlooked skills is the social skills, the ability to inspire the man, to big him up, so to speak, and make him feel like he's he can go out and take on the world.
Yeah.
To help him recover when he comes home from the daily battles.
Yeah.
And to be there as a support for him. And then there's the other set of soft skills where you know how to make him look good in front of people. And that's very powerful.
That's the ego
exactly.
Yeah.
And as you raise up in social stratus, you get up high enough, cooking and cleaning is not important. You have people to do that for you.
Yeah.
You get to a certain place where you want a woman that backs your plays. You want a woman that understands what you're doing, and at minimum won't embarrass you when you take her out.
Yes.
That's a huge problem why people can't leap from the sexual market to the marriage market, is they take the woman out and she embarrasses him in front of his friends, either by the way she treats him or the way she treats other people. So you want a woman that increases your perceived value in your social circle. If you are at a high status, or if you're seeking status. And that's very different than, what a lot of people are thinking about when they think skills, marriage skills.
Yeah. There's a certain approach that you need to have towards your man where you're willing to put yourself aside for him occasionally. You need to be able to extend support to him, and actively, if he has a problem that he's working through, maybe you can't help him, but you can make him a coffee, and you can tidy his environment, and you can do various other things. Show that you're paying attention to the things that he's trying to do, even if you're not able to directly help, and make his life easier in other ways so that he can work harder towards that goal. You don't always have to be perfectly on somebody's wavelength and perfectly able to help all of the time, but you just need to know that there are certain things that you can do so that they can focus where they need to.
Yeah, even simple things like being grateful, and I wouldn't even call this a marriage skill. This is a basic relationship skill. When you're in a relationship with someone and they do something for you and you say thank you, or you demonstrate gratefulness in reciprocal deeds, whatever it happens to be, that builds intimacy.
Yeah.
Because I gave, I trusted, and then I got back. So the intimacy builds from that. And these things are really lacking right now, both in men and women. And it's one of the reasons why it's so hard for people to draw close together, is because, the thing that guys say is the juice isn't worth the squeeze. The
Right.
effort they have to put in to get a woman isn't worth the kind of woman that they're going to get.
Yeah.
And it's mostly down to the woman not being grateful.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of problems wrapped up in this, because we're in a situation at the moment, in terms of as a whole society, we're in a situation at the moment where nice things that other people do for you are pretty few and far between. And so I don't really always understand why people are so conservative with their gratitude. If somebody does something for you, tell them you noticed. It'll make their day, because they don't have to be nice to you, right? People don't have to be pleasant to one another. It's a gesture. It's a pleasant gesture from them to you. And if you notice and you really, really appreciate that, they're going to remember you. And that applies even in the first, earliest stages of dating.
Yeah, my 8-year-old son's a master of that. When my wife makes something to eat, he takes the plate, he looks and he says, "Oh, thank you, Mom, for making me this food. This is one of my favorite foods. I really enjoy it.
Yeah.
This is so good." So now when he's gotten to that point where he does this, and then when he decides that there's something he doesn't like, and he's, "Oh, you're going to make that. That's not really something that I like so much." If you've never been grateful, well, your mother goes, "I don't care what you like and don't like. You're going to eat what's in front of you."
Yeah.
You ungrateful child.
Yeah.
No, he's always so grateful and so gracious about it that she's willing to take his interest into consideration.
Yeah.
And maybe adjust the recipe or whatever to take out that one ingredient he doesn't want, or make sure he doesn't get it. And she's not looking at it as an inconvenience for her, because she enjoys so much that gratefulness that he gives back.
Yeah.
And I think that attitude is good for us to have with all of our relationships.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about what makes you valuable in the marriage market, but value that is invisible, that can't be seen, doesn't exist. It's kind of like we have gold. Where is it? Oh, it's deep under the ground. No, you don't have gold then.
Yeah.
You have the potential to get gold.
Yeah.
It's only gold when it's out of the ground and in a bar or some useful form.
Yeah.
And so potential that you have, skills that you have that you're unable to demonstrate, they might as well not exist. And one of the ways that we can demonstrate our skills is when we're interacting with normal people in our life that we are not interested in a long-term relationship necessarily, if we treat them well,
Yeah. It's practice.
it's going to make a reputation for us. It's going to be practice. It becomes natural. You can tell when someone's faking being good.
Yeah.
It's very obvious.
The thing is, it's not, most of the time, most people are decent people deep down. So most of the time, it's not a case of faking being good or trying to be something you're not. For most people, it's a case of, I am so not used to expressing this kind of thing that I look really weird when I do it.
Yeah.
And so go out, just say thank you to the old lady if she hands you something. Just be nice generally, because the whole point of a marriage is you don't get to leave. This is what Jordan Peterson always says. He's like, if you think you're going to leave, you're not married. And so you want to make somebody happy day in, day out for the rest of their lives. That's no small task. And so practice every single day, because it needs that level of practice. This is your entire future. People take it too lightly,
Yeah, and a lot of times people want to get into a relationship, a romantic relationship, and they're so bad at people skills in general, I tell them, no, you're not ready to date.
Yeah.
Go make a friend.
Yeah.
Like there are some people who are bad enough, you have to tell them, go get a plant. Let's just start at that point.
Yeah, yeah.
But most people are at the point where it's, go make a friend. I have, if you can't, especially for men, it's our job to initiate generally. So if you want to initiate a relationship with a woman, even if she's in your social circle and you come up across her and you have conversations, that's still not initiating the potential for a date. You have to actually ask.
Yeah.
If you can't ask strangers or acquaintances for things, that's a major deficiency in your social skills.
Yes.
And go practice on people where it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Go to, practice asking to go ahead in line at a supermarket. Take one item, say, I'm in a real hurry. Could I just go ahead of you? I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
And then see what happens. You have to practice being able to ask without shame. We shouldn't have shame when we ask for things, because we should also understand that we will give back at least as much as we collected, if not more.
Yes.
And I think the reason a lot of people have this shame about asking is partially because they feel they'll look foolish doing it, but partially because they don't believe in their own ability to contribute in a way that makes it worthwhile to give to them, that makes it reciprocal.
Yeah.
And so I've had a lot of girls tell me this guy would come and hit on them. This is the same exact story.
Yeah.
Over and over again. Man comes up to me, hits on me, says, it's going well at first. He starts to ask me out, and then as soon as he asks me out, he says, but I probably wouldn't make a very good boyfriend anyway because of, and he'll say 2 or 3 negative things about himself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what I tell guys is like, you know how to get a job, right? You don't go into a job interview and go, look, I'm super lazy, but I'm really consistently at work. I just don't do much when I'm here.
Yeah.
You know, you don't come in and say, like, I really want this job, but I'm going to be terrible at it.
Yeah.
And you're not going to get any better response if you go up to a woman and do basically the same thing.
No.
I never allow men that are in my social group or my clients as well to do this kind of self-deprecation. We talk about self-deprecating humor. It's often not humorous. They're actually really hurting.
That is very serious problems. You see this over and over again with guys. You know, I had a good friend at university who he was constantly cracking terrible jokes about himself. And one day I found him in a corner in a puddle of tears. Just everything got too much for him, you know, and he didn't know what to do with himself, and he didn't know where he was going, and he didn't know what his future looked like, you know. These are small gestures like this reveal an awful lot about people, and most people don't realize. And so again, as we said earlier, you know, men are the self, the ego, the presence. If you walk up to a woman and you know, you're trying to have this moment of, this is me, this is what I'm about, do you want to come along for the ride? If your first thing that you say is, oh, actually, I'm not very good at this, that's her inspiration gone. You know, you can kiss goodbye to that woman because she's not going to be interested. You need to develop that level of self-confidence before you go out and ask a woman on a date. In much the same way that a woman needs to, you know, develop that sense of grace and pleasantness and being enjoyable to be around, and learning to crack small jokes and keep men happy and keep men entertained, and developing her wit. You know, these small things that are much more subtle in a woman but still need to be developed. You need to do that work before you go out and ask someone on a date. Otherwise you're just going to have failure after failure after failure, and then it becomes really depressing, when if you had spent those 3 months doing something else, then you would be much closer to the goal, you know? Yeah,
speaking of wit, you know, you're in my social circle, so you know I like to talk a lot.
You do.
And yeah,
you talk like an old lady. You never stop.
Yeah, so I like to talk a lot, and I find one of the most attractive things in women is when, so often I'm talking and I will pause and nobody picks up the spot. So then I'm like, okay, that's time for a little more. And then nobody picks it up. And when I'm talking with a woman and I say something and she has an intelligent reply, you know, she knows something about that subject, or at least she understands how to ask intelligent questions about a subject she doesn't understand, because there's an art to that as well.
Yeah.
And you know, I learned that when I was a kid, because I was always around these highly educated, successful adults. And how do I have a conversation with them? Well, I had to learn how to ask a question about a subject I knew nothing about.
Yeah.
And still sound like I was not an idiot, you know. That's an art. And women that can do that, men will find that very attractive, because it shows that you're interested in the things that the man is interested in, which signals compatibility. But it also signals that you can have interesting conversation. And one of my responses to one of my tweets yesterday was that marriage is essentially an ongoing conversation. And if you're terrible at conversation, you're going to have a hard time in marriage.
Yeah.
So it's really important to like hone those conversation skills, and you don't need to do it with a man. Go talk to like a man you're interested in. Go talk to some old guy at a park bench and ask him about his life.
Yeah.
It's safe. They have amazing stories sometimes, and you know you do this. I do this just because I'm interested in people. And before you know it, you know everybody in your neighborhood, and they know you.
Yeah.
And you'd be surprised the benefits that brings, because the old people, they know everything that's going on in the neighborhood.
Yeah, and they know everyone. You know, for all you know, that old guy might know of a young guy out there who's looking for somebody, you know? And the other thing about this is, you know, I don't know what it is about old men, but they have gathered so much wisdom in their lives. Usually, you know, you meet an old guy, you don't think he looks like he's ever had anything interesting going on. These people will really surprise you. I mean, I've spoken to, you know, really chubby old blokes just sitting at a bar, and, you know, once upon a time he was jumping out of a helicopter for a living. You know, these people can really surprise you, and the amount of wisdom that they have gained and the amount of experiences they've been through, even if they're not intelligent people, the fact that they've got through life to 75 and haven't died yet means that they've developed a certain amount of wisdom that they can share with you. And it's usually worth listening, you know. The older I get, the more I am fascinated by the stories of older people, because they really can teach you a lot.
Yeah, I talked to this old guy who went to the park bench, was smoking a cigar, and this old man sits down, smokes a cigarette, and I start talking to him because he's sitting close to me. Mm-hmm. And he's a tradie. He's got about 3 teeth left. He's in his 70s. Mm. And he very eloquently, but also in a very common man language, explains the entire international virus scam, you know, in detail. And I'm asked, where'd you get this from? He says, I pieced this together from the news. Now, he's not getting it from the sources we are. Yeah. He figured this out on his own. Yeah. And so, you know, he's no fool. Yeah. He says, yeah, I never believed in masks. He says, that's ridiculous. He says, I know better than that. He says, I worked in construction. Masks can't stop concrete dust from getting in your lungs. How's it going to stop anything else? Yeah. So this practical life that these people have led has all kinds of interest in it. And if you can hold a conversation with anyone you meet, men will find you interesting. I know women that aren't particularly physically attractive, mm-hmm. but who men will come to them just to talk. They want to be in their life. Yeah. They want that woman in their life. And, you know, that gives you power, because no matter how beautiful you are in your, you know, late teens, early 20s, mm-hmm. that fades, but your intellect can increase over time. And you can become more attractive in those ways. Yeah. Yeah. It's very important, you know, to... Even when you're young and plump and juicy and beautiful, you know, you need to balance that offering with other offerings. That can't be all you are, because that only lasts for so long. And the other thing is, you know, different men have different expectations from a woman. So, you know, one guy might really, really push for physical attractiveness. Another man might have a really strong need for intellectual stimulation. You never know. And so the balance of qualities that any one person is looking for may tip slightly in your favor or slightly out of your favor. It all depends, you know, on the individual. And the other thing is, physical attractiveness only accounts for so much. If you find a woman completely out of the blue who ticks every single other box, you know, she's engaging, she's funny, she keeps you on your toes, she keeps your house perfectly clean, you know, everything is just brilliant about her, but, you know, she's not the prettiest woman you could get. Well, 9 out of 10 guys would say, damn, that's a good deal. And so, you know, try not to worry too much about looks in particular. That's one thing that I say to a lot of women. It's not the be-all and end-all. And if you treat it that way, you're only going to make yourself feel terrible. And if you feel terrible, you're not going to have any confidence and you're not going to be attractive. And so you really need to capitalize on the things that you can do rather than what you fundamentally are right now. Because that, you can only change that so much, right? But you can do any number of things that you've never done before and develop skills, etc. Yeah, one of the studies that was done on what makes a person attractive, and I don't think this was done specifically for marriage market or sexual market, but it was 80-something% was physical fitness, which basically means how healthy you were. Yeah. How healthy are you taking care of yourself? And I always tell women to focus on being healthy. Yeah. Because a healthy woman is a beautiful woman. Yes. And even if you're, you know, you didn't have the best genetics, if you're healthy, you're going to look good. Mm-hmm. And a part of that is because one of the things men judge women by is how healthy they are. And that's not just physical, that's you know, emotional, psychological, and whatnot. And generally, people who put effort into their physical health tend to also put effort into maintaining their psychological health, their emotional health, and other things.
Yeah.
Because there's, they care about themselves. Why are they looking after their appearance? Because they care about themselves.
Yeah.
We have this backwards thing where we value beauty, but then if you put effort into beauty, you're vain. And it's not really, it doesn't make sense. It's conflicting concepts, and we have, women go from one extreme to the other, either, and men sometimes too, either obsessed with their looks or they don't give a damn, and both of those extremes are unhealthy.
Yeah.
There is a purpose to looking good, is to signal your healthy genes. Do that with it, and then don't worry about it anymore.
Yeah, that really is the basics. There are other small things you can do. Try to learn what flatters your actual figure. Everyone has a different figure, right? Try to learn what's basically flattering on you. Try not to wear colours that make you look terribly washed out. There are small things that you can do, but beyond that, there really is no need to obsess about it. There's no need to, go in for plastic surgeries and crazy procedures and whatever. Nobody wants that. They just want somebody who is good and healthy enough to look after themselves, look after somebody else in a relationship, and potentially look after any children. That really is the biggest thing.
Exactly. And the thing that most, we talk marriage market value. It's not relationship market value, because you can have a relationship and then never plan to get married and live apart, and you still have a relationship. It's just not marriage.
Yeah.
But for those who are going to get married, there's really only one reason why men want to get married in 2021. And that's because they want to have children, and they want to create an optimal environment to raise those children in.
Yeah.
And a man doesn't want a fake woman who's obsessed with herself to be the mother of his children. He wants a woman that takes care of herself, yes, because she has to be healthy to have healthy children.
Yeah.
But what he wants is a woman who is has that balance.
Yeah.
I love myself enough to take care of myself, but I'm not a narcissist.
Yeah. There's quite a clear line here that you can see with most people, which is, I look after myself well. I have a lot of self-respect in that area. I like to keep myself clean, tidy, presentable, healthy. And then beyond that, you have, usually that's when you start to see sheer vanity creep in, and you're talking heavy makeup, flashy handbags. Like, you can see on that person. You don't have to dig deeper to see what they're like, what their spirit is all about. You can tell. You can tell just by looking at them. And so this is why most men say, I like a woman who wears light makeup, her hair's reasonably natural. She's not extremely high maintenance, right? And because why would you want that? It's a drain on your resources. And like you said, it generally means that she is more focused on herself than she would be on you, and that's not reciprocal in a relationship.
And you mentioned it's a drain on the resources. You would think that meant that wealthy men wouldn't care.
Yeah.
And that's true in the nouveau riche. But if you look at established wealthy men, they don't marry high maintenance women.
No.
They tend to marry kind of plain girls that are also savvy and going to not be the weak spot in their armor, especially when you marry someone and they own half your property suddenly.
Yeah.
You got to have somebody you can trust.
Yeah.
And we've seen, even then, we've seen some high wealth individuals recently make some getting divorced. Obviously, they made bad choices. I think more or less they made bad choices, not in who they married, but in how they maintained their marriage.
Yeah.
And so, choosing who you're going to marry, the more wealthy you are, the more important it is, and the less important that looks is.
Yes.
And this is especially true in 2021. If women didn't get half of men's money, then looks would be the main thing that a lot of guys would go for.
Yeah.
Again, for a woman that's incredibly beautiful, having children, and for some women, they have a bunch of children, and it doesn't really affect their appearance that much. For other women, it has a big net negative appearance for one reason or another.
Yeah.
Maybe they had a hard birth. Maybe they had one of the kids was sick for a while.
Yeah.
I'm talking months, and the lack of sleep and whatnot can really affect a woman's appearance, especially in the short term. So if a woman is very appearance focused, she's going to look at that risk, and she's going to say it's not worth it. I don't want to have kids, or if I do, I'll have one kid.
Yeah.
And so men who want to have a bunch of kids, they're going to look more to a woman who is focused on maintaining her health because of her health, not so much because of
Yes.
appearance. Even if, of course, no one wants a woman that doesn't care about her appearance, but there has to be more to it than that.
Yeah, well, let's face it as well. The more you look after your health as a woman, if you have a baby, you're going to bounce back quicker because
Yes.
you're healthy.
Yeah.
So it's not a difficult equation, you know. But the issue that I have with people focusing too heavily on appearance is that it's not good for you. It's not good for your mental health. Usually it's not particularly good for your partner's mental health either, because let's say, you know, your wife spends 3 hours a day getting ready. Why is she so worried? You know, you love her, right? Why does she feel that insecure that she needs to spend that amount of time to get ready to leave the house? Isn't your contribution, your
Why
presence,
are there so many
etc.
layers
enough?
of chemicals on your body
Yeah,
that I get
it's-
an allergic reaction when I get near you?
Yeah, it really, you know, I mean, if you're obsessed about your appearance, that's not going to do much for your man's mental health, right? He's going to be wondering why your focus isn't on him rather than on yourself, you know?
Yeah. And one of the things we should talk about, because it's probably the most sensitive topic in the marriage market value discussion, is age.
Okay, yeah. This is something that I think is really, really, really important and really underappreciated as a topic, but for the wrong reasons. So if you, I know a lot of guys in our general community up to the age of about 35 who say they're looking for a pretty young girl. Which, you know, is absolutely fine, but we need to be quite careful with this. And this is one problem that I do have at the moment, where I see a lot of extremely young women getting involved in the trad community, and they're like, oh, you know, I want to have babies, I want to live on a beautiful cottage. You know, they've seen the gorgeous memes. They're basically just memes, they're just not funny ones. You know, they've seen the lovely cottage and the babies and the really enjoyable, cute things about life. They're not prepared to look after a man. Who has spoken to these women? Who has prepared them for the realities of married life? Because it's not all babies and hugs, right? And so...
Well, I mentioned that to you earlier today when we were just chatting, that,
Yeah.
that if you weren't born into a trad community,
Yes.
you're not really going to be trad. You can get the aesthetic, you can start to have traditional values.
Yes.
But you can't imitate your great-great-grandmother, who was probably at 14 ready to get married and got married somewhere between 16 and 18.
It's not the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, you haven't grown up with that. It hasn't been your reality from day one.
Well, and holding that expectation up for yourself, I think, is crushing. Because the modern women spend at least 12 or 13 years in school learning how to be men, basically. Learning how to,
more or less,
yeah, learning how to work in the corporate world,
Yeah.
which is a man's world. And even then it's destructive to men. I think it's a terrible place to work. I intentionally chose to avoid that.
Yeah.
They spend almost no time learning how to be a wife and a mother.
No.
And I've talked to women about this. Their daughter's getting close to the end of high school, and they're like, you know, I'm trying to figure out what my daughter's going to do with her future. I'm like, well, first of all, she needs to figure that out, not you.
Yeah.
That's her choice. And second of all, have you given her a well-rounded education? Does she know what it takes to be a wife and mother? I know she knows what it takes to finish school
Yeah.
and to go to university and to get a job
Well,
in the
that's
corporate
not
world.
considered education these
Yeah.
days. That's the problem. You know, homekeeping and parenting, etc., are considered the necessary evils that you have to do as well as work.
Yeah, it's a
Then-
chore.
Yeah, they're not considered work. They're just considered pointless accessories to life, if you like. Nobody really thinks about that as something worth attention.
Yeah, and it's so what it means is that young girls, they're, as you mentioned, they're not prepared for that life. They vaguely understand some aspects of it,
Yeah.
but they're not prepared for the tough grind.
No.
And you know, I have 3 small children. I have twins that are a little over 2 years old, and sometimes you get woken up 6-8 times at night when you have 2 kids.
Yeah.
So occasionally the older one wakes us up too, so it can be half the night we're up taking care of a kid that's sick, a kid that's just having a nightmare, waking up screaming for no reason in the middle of the night. Doesn't happen often, the nightmare, but you never know what's going to happen, and you have to be ready for that. And in our case, in my case, I'm like, you know, nighttime childcare is your responsibility.
Yeah.
I need to sleep so I can work in the morning. And for my wife, that's a big load on her.
Yeah.
It's difficult. It will impact her health and her life and her, her fitness and everything, because she's exhausted.
Yeah.
And that's what you have to put up with when you have very small children. And they get a little over 2, it starts getting easier. By the time they're 3, they usually sleep through the night well. Depending on the kid, my kids are always super hungry, so they need to eat all night long. But they're only seeing the memes because they haven't had any experience with it. Now, even then, if I talked to my great grandmother or others when they were still alive, and I would talk about what's the difference between a woman's life now, which would have been in the 90s when I was talking to them, and a woman's life in the 1890s, which was when her mother would have, 1920s maybe.
Yeah.
So when my great grandmother would have been young. And so she'll say, well, she told me, she says, actually women have more to do now than they did back then.
Yeah.
Because women back then cooperated with other women and worked in teams and helped each other out. And if you were a new mother, they'd be taking care of you. You know, you just had a baby, you did nothing for a few months. Well, every your sisters and sister-in-laws took care of you.
Yeah.
And then you do the same for them when it was time. And your older daughters would help out in ways that young girls don't do chores at home like they used to.
Yeah.
And so this preparation, like if you were a 16-year-old girl, you've probably already helped your mother give birth to several children, or an aunt, or your grandmother sometimes, depending.
Or at the very least, you've witnessed it. You know that it goes on. You've heard the noises. You've seen the grime. It's real. It's not just this imagined. Oh, I wonder what that's like. Because you never know.
And it not only makes you cognizant of how difficult it is, it also makes you less afraid, because I saw this happen over and over again. This is just normal.
Yeah.
You have a large family where you have 16 kids. You have 10 plus kids every generation, which means you have hundreds of cousins, which means that every week a different cousin's giving birth to a child, pretty much.
Yeah.
It's not like now it's like, oh, every couple of years someone in my family has a kid. No, it was every single week at least somebody was having a kid.
Yeah, someone somewhere.
Yeah, that's related to you, that you know somewhere. And so you're surrounded by children, that children far outnumber the adults. And what she said was, when children outnumber adults, women become incredibly organized. They become like a military general. They have no choice, yeah. And so now we have women with these very high expectations and no skill set taught to them.
Yeah.
And it's cruel because they're put into they're given a desire that they can't fulfill. And it's on both ends. They can't fulfill their desire that school gives them to be a man. They can never really be a man, and very few women can compete with men in corporate world. It's too masculine and cutthroat.
Yeah, then school doesn't train women for careers. It trains women for jobs, because 9 out of 10 women can't hold it down in a career. It's too stressful. It's too emotionally loading. We can't handle it.
And even some of those ones that go into the corporate world, I've helped quite a few of them get out in their late 20s, early 30s. They're burned out. They need to leave. Yeah. And it was cruel to have them in there in the first place, but they didn't know until they burned out.
Yeah.
And what we see is, and then the women that are left, that are like 40 and are still in there, they're the ones that are, the 1 or 2% that can handle it really well. Yeah. And so you see them and you go, hey, yeah, I see women in there. I could be like so-and-so. It's like, no, you can't. That's not your makeup. You're not like that woman. You're different. And vice versa. Then, okay, let's go back to trad, and let's get married young and have kids. But you haven't been trained to do that either. You literally, the only thing society's training young women to be nowadays is whores. It's telling them everything they need to know about sex and degeneracy, and not anything about how to actually have a happy life.
Yeah,
and
it's how to make enough money so that you can go out drinking every Friday night in your skimpiest skirt. That really is
how to set up your OnlyFans account.
Yeah.
How to get likes on social media is basically practice for setting up your OnlyFans account.
Yeah, it's terrifying. If you really look at it that way, it is terrifying. And the other thing I wanted to add on to the point you made earlier is if you're not prepared for the married life practically, you know, you haven't had that experience where there are important things happening around you that you can relate to your future life. You're also not prepared mentally. You know, especially in today's world where most people's parents are divorced, right? So you haven't watched how your mother interacts with your father, the nice things that she does for him, etc., etc., etc. You haven't watched that relationship play out. You have no experience. You don't know what to expect, you know. And it's normal now for people to have to find alternative sources to learn crucial information that, you know, will affect their relationship. I learned to cook from my father. You know, he was an incredibly good cook. It's a practical skill. I observed, I learned for myself. You know, it's simple, but generally that isn't the traditional way. You know, it's not trad. It's just useful.
Yeah, and I think this is something we have to realize is that none of us are probably trad.
Yeah.
If you're trad, you're not listening to this because you're on your farm digging potatoes.
Yeah.
You know,
you have no idea who we are, and you don't care.
No,
yeah.
you know, if you want to say you're trad, you're basically Amish, more or less.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, you can still have traditional values.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean that you're trad.
No.
That's like saying, I really love science, and so I'm a scientist. You know, just because you value something doesn't mean that is that was how you were raised, and that's the lifestyle that you're prepared for.
Yeah.
And so the question is then, what do we do when we were raised to be modern men and women living, you know, these disconnected, degenerate lifestyles is how we were raised, what we were pushed into. Mm-hmm. How do we uphold the values that we have, the healthy values that some people call them traditional values. For some people, it's Christian values. For some people, it's simply natural law, upholding the law of nature, what is good for survival and for our organism.
Yeah.
We can't look to a pattern that doesn't fit us to get there.
It's isolating. Usually when people go through this kind of process, say they want to disconnect from bad habits that won't serve them in terms of finding a long-term partner and having a family, generally people will go through a period where they isolate themselves. That's usually step one. It's I'm done with this. I don't want to do any of these terrible things that I've previously been doing.
You have to go out into the desert.
Yeah. This is your 40 days and nights on your own, really figuring out where are you going, what are you going to do, and then it's a case of you have to retrain yourself to interact with the world with a new set of values. And there are a lot of problems that come along with that. So people who already know you will notice your change in approach. And this might not be conscious. You might not be consciously acting any differently. You're just consciously not doing the things that you have now figured out were negative. But people will pick up on that and they will comment on that. And you have to be strong enough within yourself to say, well, actually, I've changed my mind. I prefer to behave this way now.
There needs to be a certain humility.
Yeah.
It's really hard to have because
it's a combination of
old
humility.
me was wrong. You have to be able to say that.
Yeah, it's a combination of humility and extreme assertiveness. It's a case of, no, this is what I'm going to do. No, you can't make me feel bad about it. And I have decided to change my path, and this is what I want in life. And you have to be very clear with people because human beings don't really like change. If you have, if you're coming out of a place that wasn't really going in the right direction for you and you've decided to change track, you might have to leave certain people behind. You might have to get closer to others who you actually didn't like very much, and you've got all that to figure out. There are an awful lot of things that can change along the way that you are not necessarily prepared for. So you really do have to be humble, one, and extremely assertive on the other hand. Without those two things in place, you're not going to make it.
This is why you often see there's more men that make these radical changes than women, is because of the assertiveness.
Yeah.
And so it's very difficult. We want women who are agreeable in general, but we also need women who are highly assertive, and those two things are conflicting.
Yeah. And
so when you have that mixture there, it's very difficult. It's almost like the magic ingredients to get you where you want, and they're in the personality. And one of the things that I think is a huge mistake is most people believe their personality is fixed.
Yes.
They don't understand how much they can adapt and adjust to what is needed if they put the effort in. And it's almost a brainwashing process that you do to yourself, where you decide, I'm not assertive enough. I will be more assertive.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm not going to be an asshole. I'm just going to be more, I'm going to stick to the thing that I decided more.
Yes.
I'm going to be more steadfast in that.
Yeah. And this is the thing. It's, at first, you're going to feel like a liar.
Yeah.
And that's natural. You just got to get over it. You know, if you're going out there, you're trying to stand up for yourself when people have been walking all over you for 5 years, you're going to feel like an idiot. Do it anyway.
Yeah.
Even if people still try to walk all over you, at least you've put in the effort. And the more you do that, the more it builds up. But in terms of, especially for women, generally what you find with most women is they're agreeable with people they feel safe with. If you have a woman who is also agreeable with people she fundamentally doesn't agree with or feels unsafe around, etc., etc., that's extremely unhealthy.
It's the reaction.
You will
reaction
need
to
appropriate help for that particular problem, because that's not something that only changing your approach in your own mind can help you with. If you're rolling over to everybody, that there's something deeper there that needs to be addressed, that you need to see somebody about.
Yeah, that I found that often comes from a trauma where that was a survival necessity, was to comply with the wishes of someone who wanted to hurt you in order to survive.
Yeah, usually it's an extreme fear response.
Yeah, and it gets ingrained, you know, especially if it's if you're young when that happens, and if it happens over a period of time. And it doesn't have to always be the kind of, you know, television level horror stories that, you know, sensationalist horror stories. It can be a domineering parent who wants to control your life. It can be something as simple as, you know, the parents that make the kids study, you know, 4 hours a day after school, and they're just controlling them all the time.
Yeah.
And eventually the kid just goes, fine, I'll just do whatever they want, just so I don't have to hear them harping on to me.
Yeah.
And you'll know this, because if a child is afraid of their parents' reaction, you've got a problem. They're going to do that in future relationships. I'm actually in the most of the way through writing a book about anti-manipulation, and I very clearly explain in there the reason why most people are easy to manipulate is because they were manipulated as children by their parents, by their school, by everyone around them, and they had to comply because their source of food and shelter was the one doing the manipulation, and so they had to mentally detach from it.
Yeah.
And say, oh, this is fine. I'm just going to go along with this because the alternative is starving to death outside in the cold.
Yeah.
And
this is extremely difficult for women as well, because women are by nature more agreeable. So if you want to go against the wishes of your parents who've brought you up since you were tiny, you know, it's going to be more emotionally straining on you to change your behavior from the things that they taught you, because you associate your being much more with the group than you do with yourself as an individual. You know, young boys especially, they love to rebel. They really go to town on it, you know, they don't mess around. But girls, they'll go so far, and then they don't want to go any further. And if you are from a background that has damaged you, you have to overstep your comfort level. And that can be extremely difficult for women.
And oftentimes I notice for women, the only time that, especially younger girls, the only time they do full-on rebellion is when they're not getting attention. And it's more of an attention thing rather than I'm going to fix my life. Like, I don't generally see them rebelling by,
No.
I'm not going to have any sex and drugs and alcohol, and I'm going to, you know, have a wholesome and good life and, you know, this is not the general method of rebellion.
No.
It is the only real rebellion against the current society we live in, but it's not what tends to do, because it doesn't get attention.
No.
Basically, everyone says, oh, good, okay, you're fine now. You don't need any more help. Who's next? And they go on to help the next unfortunate, you know, person that's got themselves into trouble.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things, we talked a little bit about the difficulties that very young women have in the marriage marketplace due to being unprepared.
Yeah.
Now, in that unprepared, that doesn't necessarily go away just because you get older. But the real question a lot of men ask is, why should I marry a 30-year-old woman when I can marry a 20-year-old woman?
Yeah.
And that is a legitimate question.
Yeah.
Especially if you want to have kids. And, you know, I have heard it explained, and it does make sense, that from like 18 to 30 is prime time for women to get married.
Yeah.
But then there's like a valley between 30 and 40 where it's very difficult. Because if you're after 40, you can get married into a relationship where nobody wants kids, because by the time you get married and settle down, it'll be a little too late. If you're before 30, you get married to someone who wants to have kids, because now you have plenty of time to have 3 or 4, whatever you want.
Yeah.
Because people who want children usually want a bunch of them, so they have siblings to play with. And then if you're in your 30s, you're not appealing to either of those groups.
No.
You're young enough that you're going to still want kids, and you're going to probably have like almost baby fever at that point.
Yeah.
But you're older than the ideal age for marrying for kids. And I have helped women in this age range get married before.
Yeah.
And the key is that, again, this is why market thinking like a marketing person makes sense in this.
Yeah.
If you don't have youth to offer, you have to compensate by offering other things.
Yes.
You have to be higher in skills because you don't have the years.
Yeah. This is where you expand your personality as far as possible in order to. The thing is, it sounds quite terrible to say, compensate for your age. That's a really, it's not a nice way of putting things. Everybody ages. It's perfectly natural. It's perfectly normal. People shouldn't feel ashamed of it. But we do have to be aware that, the longer you go on in life, and if you're not in a relationship already, you haven't already had children, you're expected to know more anyway. If you've been alive for 30 years versus 20, people expect you to know a third more and to be capable, with a third more things in life. So
imagine you have a man who's
it's not
20.
Unreasonable
What
to
do you do for a
expect
living?
that.
I work at McDonald's. It's like, okay, you're 20, you work at McDonald's.
Yeah,
you're
who
going to
cares?
college, who cares?
Yeah.
You meet a guy who's 40. So what do you do for a living? I work at McDonald's, go to college. He does the exact same thing, his life's in the same place. And I've met guys like that. Some men take longer to mature.
Yeah.
Some men just don't mature.
Men usually take a lot longer to mature.
Yes. Well, and to really, it depends how much trauma they had as children, and depends on their trauma reaction. So some people's trauma reaction slows down their progress, and for other people, it greatly accelerates it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of that RK selection thing. So if you are selected, trauma will cause you to grow up very quickly, so that you are on your own and can look after yourself, because everything's unstable. And if you're K selected, it will cause you to be so careful with risk taking that you almost don't grow.
Yeah.
And so this is why we talk about R and K selection, and often everyone's like, well, everything about K selection is better than everything about R selection. And that's not really the way it is. By the way, if you want to know more about that, my website, smv4k.com, has articles about R and K selection. Just search K selection, you'll find the articles. But the fact is that both men and women are judged pretty harshly if they don't produce something of value as they age. And so for men, that is produce in the monetary, career, social connections, that kind of stuff. And for women, it's produce value as mothers or as potential partners and stuff like that.
Or as valued members of the community.
Yes.
Anything that's a feminine domain, basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not unreasonable to expect a 30-year-old woman to really know what she's on about and to be able to run a home. It's perfectly normal. It's nothing to really worry about. If you're getting up for 30, maybe 35 or 40 years old, and you're still looking for someone, it's not difficult to reconnect with those skills that you've probably had to learn. Nobody gets to 35 and they haven't cooked one decent meal in their life, right? It's not difficult.
Well, even simple things like, I expect an attractive 20-year-old woman to be a flake, to show up late for things and to forget things, and to leave things behind when she leaves the bar, and typical. I'm good enough looking, I can get away with this, and I'm young enough that no one's going to think that I'm an idiot. They'll just say, oh, they're young, they make mistakes.
Yeah.
Now, if a 30-year-old woman is still as flaky as she was when she's 20, that's what the problem is because as you get older, the years left that you have to live life diminish, but you haven't accomplished anything. You're not trading years for anything.
Yeah.
And what it shows is, in part, that you aren't capable of improvement, and no one is at a stage where marriage will be perfect for them at this moment. Like, people say, well, how do I know I'm ready for marriage? Well, after you get married, if you don't get divorced, you're ready for marriage.
Yeah, you're always ready and you're never ready.
Yes.
And that applies to everyone. It doesn't matter how old you are, it doesn't matter what background you're from. If the right thing comes along and you have prepared yourself adequately and so have they, it's going to work out. If not, then no. But you can't say, I absolutely have to get married before the age of 30, or that's the end of the world. It's not like that.
No, it's more to adjust your expectations as you get older. And so it's kind of like a man who is going to go into the corporate world with no corporate experience at 30 versus a man who just got out of college.
Yeah.
Okay, so he can go in and get an internship. If you're 30, they just won't give you an internship. You have to have other ways to get into that market.
Yeah, what else have you done? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always a case of, how have your life experiences to this point added up in a way that points towards the fact that you would be useful for this position? If this position, as like a job opportunity, is wife, what have you done that has, put you towards that end goal?
Well, a great way that I do when I'm asking clients is, I say, so they want to date. Like, why? I want to get married. Okay. What is the job that you're applying for as a wife? What does that mean?
Yeah.
What is a wife?
Yeah.
And so they will give their description of it, and if their description's close, I'll leave it. I'll help them maybe adjust that description, and then I'll say, what about the way you've been living your entire life up to now would make a man believe that you are capable of fulfilling that job description?
Yeah.
And usually the answer is absolutely nothing.
Yes.
Like, either there wasn't anything or they don't know. Sometimes people just don't recognize what they've been doing, and I help them come to a realization that they actually are adjusted, but very often they're not.
Well, the other difficult thing is, a lot of womanhood and the roles that are expected of a wife involve other people. If you're cooking for a group of people, you're cooking for everybody. If it's just you, and you're at university or whatever, you can't be bothered cooking a whole meal just for yourself, especially if you don't eat very much. Most women don't eat as much as a man. So
I cook for 2 and eat both of them.
Yeah, exactly. I cook for 3 and Ryan eats most of it. That's just what happens, But what I mean by that is, there is very little incentive when you're on your own to prepare yourself for things that involve other people. And so you really have to, as a woman, you have to go out of your way to look for opportunities to please other people, to get practice to be a wife.
Well, this is why the situation women used to be in, where they worked in a group and they cooperated with each other, was so valuable for women, because there was always someone to help. If you, for some reason, were single past the normal age of marriage in your community, you had a load of aunts and cousins and sisters and other people that you could help out with their kids. You could,
you would still have a role.
People used to randomly die for basically no reason, and so I'm going to take care of my nieces, because my sister died. That happened all the time, and you would find a role where you were suited, where you got the kind of practice, and maybe even if you never got married, you would still have that opportunity to get in mothering and relationships, and you'd be a valued part of your community. Right now, if you're a young single woman, and I mean young under the age of 40, if you're a young single woman and you're not either in a high-performing corporate job or a mother with at least 3 children, you don't get given any value by society. You're looked at as defective, because we haven't created places for those women where they can behave in an honorable way and do something that contributes to society. And that's one of the things we really lost with these close communities.
Well, you have to look for those opportunities. I mean, that's more,
or create them.
That's more or less my situation, right? Ryan and I don't have children yet. I'm 26 years old, coming up for 27, I actively look for ways to plug into the community, to do nice things for our friends, to make people cookies, make people laugh, ask how somebody's doing after a breakup, or, you really need to make sure that you're offering yourself to your community. If you want feminine roles, offer a feminine presence to the people around you. It can feel strange at first, if you're not used to putting yourself out there as a presence, or as feeling like other people might actually rely on you for anything. It's going to take a little bit of practice, but it's worth it. It gets you out there, it gets that practice in, and it keeps your community healthy as well. That's a really large part of what women do. They keep healthy communities. They make sure that if somebody at one end of the town needs to know something that the other person over there has going on, they will be told. They will.
Yeah, before telephones, we had Telewoman, and pretty soon everybody knows.
Yeah. It's obviously you also have to have discretion with these things. It's not a case of talk about everything, but yeah, what I mean is, if you're looking for a feminine role and you have no children, you maybe are not married, there are ways to put yourself out there as a graceful and feminine force that will strengthen your community and make people look upon you in good favor.
One of the last things I wanted to talk about is that we have a massive problem right now with men, that most men are sufficiently socially incompetent that they don't know the proper way to approach a woman, either in person or in messages.
Yeah.
And it's so bad that I think these basic communication skills should have been taught in school, although the way that schools are, you'd probably get taught wrong on purpose just for a joke. But yeah, I don't have a lot of respect for public schools, but this is something that is so shocking to women that most of the time they won't even respond to men.
No.
And I've had women, this last Friday I solicited women to give me shots of the DMs that they're getting, and I told guys to go and DM the women.
Yeah.
And what I noticed is the men aren't particularly socially skilled. They're literally right to, you're attractive, let's go on dates.
Yeah.
Yeah, but on the other hand, the women have, now there are some guys that shouldn't get any grace, they should just be ignored.
Yeah.
Okay. But in some cases there was a lack of grace on the women's part.
Yeah.
Because if you got 10 interesting guys messaging you, you don't have time to show grace to the guy who messages you awkwardly.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if that's what you're getting,
it's not
make
only
the
that.
best of
It's
that.
not only that either, right? If you've got someone who is doing a really terrible job of introducing themselves to you, right? If you don't respond, maybe he will rethink his approach. And so you're actually doing the community a favor by not responding to every single message, right? And you're also not exhausting yourself. But here's the advice that I would give to people. If you're a man, we discussed this earlier, men are ego, and women like that. Women like to see a presence. So if you're messaging a woman, who the hell are you? Tell her who you are. Tell her who you are. Tell her the things you're interested in. Tell her what you do for a living. If
it's on
if
Twitter,
you want to be open about
read
that.
a few of her posts, find one that's interesting to you, and say, I noticed that you posted about this particular topic. It's something I find really interesting, and give her a question about it, and say,
but don't
how do
fake it. You actually have to be interested, right?
Well, that also means you have to be interesting.
Yeah. You basically, you're marketing yourself. This is like a sales pitch. It's like, here I am. These are the things that I like. If you also are interested in these things, come over. Let's have a conversation.
I know a bunch of couples that it literally started with him saying, I saw your tweet on such and such, and I disagree with the premise. And he laid out an argument, was a short, to the point argument about why he disagreed with the premise.
Yeah.
And then she said, you know what? Maybe you're right.
Yeah.
And the reason is because you got to have, big brass balls to approach a woman you don't know and say, you are wrong.
Yeah.
In 2021, it's like, the thing, the most attractive thing you can say to a woman is you are wrong at the moment. And the second is no.
Yeah.
Because they don't hear that. And it also is a huge indicator of your belief in your own self
Yeah,
and your own ego.
it's a sign that you're self-assured enough to handle a disagreement.
Yes.
Because if you're going
especially
in on
when
the
it comes
offensive,
with a little backup, like you say, I disagree, and here's why.
yeah, you know, you have to be a fully reasoned human being in order to get a decent response from anybody. But yeah, you know, if you're a man, you need to make yourself known honestly for who you are, what you're about, and yeah, don't be afraid to be a little bit abrasive. You know, women like that. Women like to know that you're not going to mess around, because at the end of the day, one day she's going to rely on that for you to protect her. So these are really important things. And the other thing at the other end of the stick for women is try not to be too harsh to guys. You know, it's easy to just be like, please go away, and to not give them a chance. You know, if they're doing their best to communicate a genuine picture of themselves, which is very important, a genuine, honest picture of themselves, which is interesting, don't tell them to go away just because you can. You know, there are a million guys out there, and I know that a lot of women get very fed up of getting messages from people, and they get very fed up of feeling like they're constantly being chased for nothing other than sex, right? But if a man is putting himself forward to you, it's very difficult in the early stages to figure out whether or not he wants more than sex. So you do have to give that chance.
I think as long as the man is putting effort forward, so there's a lot of guys they'll be like, hey, what's up?
Yeah.
Hi.
Yeah.
Hey, you know, I remember I think it was my dad would say, hey is for horses, or, you know, don't come up to people and say, hey, you wouldn't do that in public. You wouldn't stand beside a woman and go, hey,
no.
hey, you, hey. You know, you wouldn't do that. Why would you do it online? Mm-hmm. It's incredibly irritating. And as long as you're putting more effort into that, we're at a point where ideal doesn't exist. Ideal is that men are skilled, and when I say seduction, I don't mean towards sex, but they're skilled persuaders to persuade women into marriage, mm-hmm. and women are adequately prepared for those marriages, and it all works together.
Well,
but we don't have that, so we have to make do with what we got, and sometimes that means good men that are not very socially skilled.
Yeah. I mean, what's the best that we can generally hope to do as a society right now? It's a case of, you know, you get a guy, he's not perfect, but he really wants to work towards the goal of a good, strong family and a nice woman. And you find a woman who does the same. Well, if those two people get together and decide to work on themselves as a group, give them 3 years, they could be in great shape. You know, so perfection doesn't always come from day one, and a lot of women especially are very guilty of looking for perfection in a guy. You can't expect to have that. You know, no. You can never expect to have that. Even the most wonderful person, you know, I'm very lucky. I loved Ryan to bits long before we got together. I'm really lucky, you know, it's a dream come true for me. But he still annoys the hell out of me sometimes. There is no such thing as perfection. And a lot of people delude themselves into thinking that.
A lot of the things that make a man successful in the things that men do also make us annoying to women.
Yeah.
And
yes.
So your choice is have a man who caters to your needs, mm-hmm. but is a complete loser, and you're basically the man in the relationship.
Yeah.
Or have a man that does what must be done and occasionally irritates you.
Yeah.
By his like single-minded focus and forgetting of other things and
that kind
of stuff. You know?
Ryan's like this all the time, right? You know, he'll get really, really focused on one project that he has to do. He doesn't remember to even feed himself. You know, this is where my role comes in. You know, he doesn't remember to cook breakfast. He doesn't remember to make himself a coffee. You know, he's focused. He's doing what he does. And the other thing that happens, you know, quite often with guys is, you know, say they've had a really strong week, you know, they're getting really stressed. They'll have this one day where they get all puffed up. It's like, yeah, you know, I'm still here, I'm still cool, you know, and they puff themselves up. You know, women get tired of that pretty quickly, but it's necessary for him. You know, let him think of himself as important, because he bloody is. And even if he's had a terrible week, his presence is important for the both of you. And so there is a degree of, women need to be very patient with their men. You know, don't expect him to always be the picture of ideal and, you know, doting on you 24/7. You know, he's got stuff to do and he's going to act like it. You need to know that it's okay to take a back seat in those situations.
Absolutely. And I think when it comes to dating, kindly pointing out to men where they make an introduction and it's clumsy and it's silly. And you have to understand that men, especially men that want to get married, they can be overly to the point, especially if they've been listening to people like Stefan Molyneux, who says, first date, get it out of the way. Tell her you were looking to get married and you want 6 kids and, you know, this is like the dating for autists type thing. And
well, what's the problem with that? Because let's face it, there isn't a problem with that. If you want to have a serious relationship, you want to be honest with people. So the only reason that this is a problem is because women are extremely agreeable. So if you go in on a first date and you say, I want to get married, she's going to think, oh my God, I need to somehow figure out whether I can agree to this within 6 months. You know, I
just want to know if I can trust you.
She's going to
finish the date and not abduct me.
She's going to feel like it's a pressure put on her immediately. You know,
well, surprisingly,
and
women are much more. Women are much more commitment adverse than men. This is the lie we've been told, that men don't want commitment. Men love the idea of commitment because that gives us some known for us to plan and structure and organize our lives.
Yeah.
Whereas most women have a very fragile ego, and the reason they don't want to commit, when you dig down, is I don't know that I can do it.
Yeah.
About everything. Yeah. I mean, even my own wife, to commit on something, we're going to do some project, like, do you think we can have this project done by the end of the weekend? Well, I'll do my best. Okay, like that means it's a coin toss that it'll be done, right? And because if she commits to it, she gets this deep sense of, I must accomplish it. I gave my word, and you know, it's so heavy for her. The stress that causes her. Whereas if she just does her best, it might get done. Either way, it's not more likely to get done when she commits, because all she ends up doing is stressing too much. And I think that's true for most women. And the reality is I've asked women, what's going through your head on first dates? And it's like, is he some crazy psycho killer? Is he gonna? And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but it just doesn't make sense. They don't know, they don't trust. And what the man's job is to gain enough trust with her that when you propose the next stage of the relationship, she's all on board for it.
Yeah. And the other thing that I think is really, really important to mention here is, don't pin all of your hopes on dating. You know, dating sets up, the whole point of dating is to artificially set up an environment where you can court, essentially. It's not natural. Don't kid yourself into thinking that dating is natural, because it's absolutely not. You know, if you go back 100 years, you would probably have married the girl down the street who you knew since you were 7 years old, and you know,
no trust issues.
Yeah, you loved her to bits.
You worked that out when you were 7.
Dating is not normal, and so don't expect for everything involved in dating to go smoothly. And also, if you can, try to make your dates as informal and fluid and natural as possible. You know, do activities together that demand the two of you cooperate in ways that aren't just sitting and talking and interrogating each other. Use the rest of the human set of skills, you know, other methods of communication, because these are the ways that you get to know somebody that don't immediately place all of your expectation on them.
Yeah.
You know, it's a case of, you can do some gardening together, or you could go and shoot some paintball together, or whatever, you know, these small things that are fun and enjoyable and fluid and natural. Don't sit someone down on a first date for a huge interview. It's not the way to go, you know?
Okay, I've brought the paperwork.
Yeah.
Did you bring your bank statements? Let's find out if we're financially compatible, and then we'll go from there. Yeah, I know there's a level of you have to make it fun. You know, my idea, not just when a date, but whenever I'm married, so I don't go out on new dates with people I'm not, other than my wife. But my expectation when I go and meet people is only that I will have an enjoyable social interaction with them. That's the only expectation I want. Yeah. Everything else from that is a bonus. And what happens is we tend to go into dates, and this, the older we get, the worse this is. We go into these dates with this scarcity mindset of, I'm just sick of dating. I'm sick of this whole process. I just want to get this over with. And you rush it, and you ruin it because you're pushing something that's not yet come about organically.
Yes.
And it has to come about organically. You can't force someone to like you or love you or trust you, and really they have to trust you before any of those other things. Yeah, you can not like someone but trust them. There are people I don't like, but I'm absolutely sure how they would behave in a given situation because they're very consistent.
Yeah.
But I might not like them, but that's okay. I can still interact with them because I trust them.
Yeah.
But if I like them but don't trust them, I don't really want to interact with them.
Yeah.
Because it's always a risk. It's like that drinking buddy that you might have a great evening or you might end up in jail and you're never sure.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know? And you, as a man, well, the woman has to do this too. You have to prove trustworthiness, and that doesn't happen immediately. And there's no point in talking long-term relationship until you have some trustworthiness.
Yeah.
It's jumping the gun, and there's no point in seeing if you're trustable if you can't at least have conversations together and enjoy each other's company.
Yeah. This is one area that I think people really, they go wrong very quickly. You know, you don't have to go into every interaction with a member of the opposite sex thinking that this could be your life partner.
Yeah.
You know,
I've had people telling me that after DMs, they've never spoken to the person before. They're about to go on a date and they're so excited about it. Unfortunately, the date is set like 2 weeks ahead, so they can really, obsess about it for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And they cancel every other potential date they could have because they're sure they're going to marry this person.
Yeah.
And after the date, I'm like, how did it go? And 9 times out of 10, it went way worse than an average date because of the heavy expectations they put upon it.
Yeah. It's not just that as well. It's a case of, you build up this picture in your head. A lot of people, dating is particularly bad for this because what do you do when you go on a date? Okay, you make yourself as physically attractive as possible. You're thinking through all your lines, what are you going to say to this girl or what are you going to say to this guy? You're making yourself hyper interesting for this one moment. And so wouldn't it be better if you could find someone who you could maybe bump into on the street? And if you consistently find that they're really enjoyable to be around, then that's great. But a date is an artificial setup. And so it's an opportunity basically for both parties to put on a costume, put on a persona, get through the day and hope it goes well. Well, that's not real life. That's not a real reflection of what that person is like. And it's not a real reflection of the bond that you've created with that person either, because both of you have put on a front. And so you're not being your real selves. And so the bond isn't real. And so there's a really vicious cycle that can go on with dating unless you handle it very, very carefully and make sure that there is an opportunity to be natural. Yeah,
a lot of people, they completely overlook the meeting people through social circles, meeting people at events and parties where you just spend time with them. And if they're in your social circle and your circle is active, you might see them as often as you would see someone you were going to date.
Yeah.
But there's a lot less pressure in those environments. And part of the reason is, you mentioned earlier, women's agreeableness. Mm-hmm. And what tends to happen is, I see, sometimes even guys do this to me. We're out somewhere and I will, I have controversial opinions, and so I'll broach my controversial opinions to people who by their visual appearance probably do not agree. And I'll finally start agreeing with me, and they'll be super agreeable, but I know they don't really deep down inside agree to it.
No.
And they're going to change, and even if they do, they're going to change their mind the moment some other influential person comes along and tells them to believe something different.
Yeah.
And so if you're in a group setting, the woman's, or the man isn't trying to impress you. They're there with all their friends. If they affect a totally different personality, their friends are going to mock them for it.
Yeah.
They're going to call them on it.
Yeah.
And you're going to see a more honest version of them than they can afford to put on a date.
Yeah.
And that's why I said, it's building trust is the first thing. First, you got to know if you even enjoy their company.
Yeah.
But as soon as that's true, and I think most people can enjoy each other's company.
Yeah.
Unless you're a total asshole. But if you can enjoy their company and you can build some trust in them, you're halfway there. But that can't happen in, like you said, a very artificial environment. So if you're in a group with friends, you're seeing them for who they really are. They didn't come there to impress you. So if they're impressive, then Like, I met my wife at the beach at a moment where she was completely exhausted because she, her father has one bum leg, so she unloaded the entire family's vacation supplies for a month-long vacation on her own, and then she walks out to the beach where my friends and I were, and that's how I met her. And so she was completely exhausted from that and just flopped down on the beach and had a nap. And it wasn't the most like flattering way to meet someone.
No.
But I kind of saw her at her worst, and then I was like, okay, I can deal with that. That's not bad at all.
Yeah.
And if that's her worst, if that's her exhausted and grumpy from traveling, then what's she going to be like when she's feeling better,
Yeah.
And so I really, right from the beginning, I knew that she couldn't trick me easily in front of all of her friends.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you also learn, if you think that, let's say a lot of my followers are Christians, you want a good Christian man, but all of his friends are not Christian, or they are leading lives which aren't compatible with a good Christian man.
Yeah.
It's highly unlikely that he's really living the way he says he is.
No.
Because he wouldn't have those people in his life.
Well, I mean, you can only spend time with your friends expecting to, have the kind of time that your friends want to have. That's pretty natural, So meeting somebody's friends early on is usually a really good indicator of what they're like, And generally you will find that men have larger and more vibrant and more diverse social groups than women do, because women tend to kind of stick in their own really small little cliques, and they get to know somebody and they get comfy, and that's it, Men generally have more diverse friendships, but if you can look at every one of a man's friends and say, he's a good man in his own way, it doesn't matter what his religious affiliation, etc., etc. is, but if you can look at him and say, he's a good man, that's a good place to start.
Yes.
Yeah,
that's excellent. So we've talked quite a bit about what we can do to improve our own marriage market value, how we can spot marriage market value in other people. And the thing is that no matter how many podcasts you listen to, or self-help books you read, or courses you take about dating, nothing compares to having an actual coach, a mentor to help you. And that is the way that we all learned how to couple up in the past, was through someone mentoring us. Usually it was our parents. Yeah. We're just not getting that nowadays. We're the most under-fathered generation in history, I say, but we're also the most under-mothered generation. We have this kind of toxic mothering from the state, the nanny state, but we don't have that true
that one-to-one connection
one-to-one
that a mother
loving
has.
that loving, that demonstration of how to behave in relationships. We just don't have that in general. And so what we need to do is go out and find mentors who will help us cultivate that in ourselves. And so I mentor people, and you were talking recently that you and Ryan were going to be starting to offer. Was this for married couples to help them, or was this for people who are looking to get married?
Well, we're basically offering a relationship counselling of any kind. So if you've been together for 3 weeks with somebody, you want to make sure it goes well. You've never done dating before, and neither have they, and you're both nervous. Yes, we can offer you some help there. We can help you get to know each other. We can help you figure out what each other are like, that kind of thing. But also, for women and men who've been in longer term established relationships, and they're coming across a few problems. So yeah, we're quite broad with this. It's a case of, Ryan is a really well-versed psychologist especially, and so he works with things that are fundamental. What is a man? What is a woman? And really to bring it right back down to the core. And so anyone who thinks that they could benefit from something that really taps into the center of the being sort of thing, that's where we aim to help.
So I'm going to put a link to your Twitter feed, the new one that you established for this joint coaching or mentoring programs you're offering.
Yeah.
I'm going to put that in the description of the video. And thank you very much today, Alice, for joining me and for having this discussion.
You're welcome. Hopefully we can get Ryan on at some point as well.
Yeah, we got a setup here. We can record up to 4 people, so we'll get him on for sure.
Cool.
Thank you for watching our video, and I hope it inspired you to take action in your life. Please subscribe to our channel and like this video to get more agency building content. The real secret sauce is in our newsletter. Click on the link in the video description below to sign up. I promise I won't flood your inbox, and anything that we do send you will be of high value.